So millions of people around the world suffer every single day, may that be with illness, may that be with mental health, an endless array of things people suffer with. And a big question that, theological scholars, philosophers, everyone has pondered for such a long time is, why do people suffer? It's such a ginormous question, and where do you even begin? But today, ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning that question with the man, the myth, legend, Steve Gomez. How's it going?
Thank you. Yeah, all good. Happy Easter to you. Happy Easter that he is risen. Absolutely. It's a great day. Not quite with it because clock's gone forward and I'm still not quite catching up. Seems to make it worse every year. It gets worse and worse. But that's something to do with my age, I think. I'm probably getting to that stage where I'll never get used to it. Anyway, we've got a wonderful talk. When I say wonderful, how can I call suffering wonderful? But I think by the end of it, I'm hoping that you would have got something out of it. As with all our conversations, these opinions that we express, I hope you all get something out of it, and I hope it really helps you. And if it does, feel free to share it. Don't be shy. Pass it on. Recommend us to people. What we'd really like to do is the programs, the series is called Incite, which is not only insight into deeper level of thinking, but also inciting all of us to do something more positive in our lives. And I think it's particularly pertinent that we're talking about suffering on this Easter day, because it's kind of like the saddest day to the gladdest day, isn't it, really? So, yes, Friday was Good Friday. And I had every Good Friday I try to tame it down, just try and spend a day where I'm contemplative of what happened 2,000 years ago. And we decided to go to Arundel, so I wanted to go to Arundel Cathedral for the Passion service that they have there. I don't know why, I just felt like going there. But on the way, we got caught up in a traffic jam, and the traffic jam was caused just outside Chichester by people going to the retail park. And dear. it was sick. And I was sitting there, and okay, I've only relatively recently, in the last 10, 15 years, but even as a child, Good Friday and the Easter period was very important for us growing up as a Catholic boy. And but even then, the 4 days bank holiday was a great day for getting drunk, going out with your mates, having fun. And I'm not knocking that, people do that, but I kind of felt this like sadness when I saw all these people going and buying things at this retail park. And I was like sitting in the car, we were sitting in the car thinking, we're trying to go to church, we're trying to do something which we felt was important for us, because by understanding what Jesus went through on that particular day, it helps us to build our faith and grow our faith. And also it was just a period of contemplation, and it was a really pleasant day. It was actually a really lovely day. And in the Passion, I don't know if you've been to a Catholic service at the Passion. Basically, you have three people who reenact the Passion of Christ from the start, from Pilate right to the crucifixion and then being taken down from the cross. So it's quite an important. It's really beautifully done. And for Catholics especially, I know all Christians will agree with this. It's a very special time.
Suffering in life is one of the most challenging things to think about, to understand the why and the what, and to an extent there is no why and what. Well, there is, but to atheists there is none. It's kind of like anything's up for grabs. Is it this? Is it that? Who knows? But starting off talking about suffering and what suffering is, why? Well, I guess we'll start with the big question: Why do you think people suffer?
I think there are many reasons for suffering, and I think suffering is a human condition. It's very difficult to go through life without suffering. A mother suffers pain in childbirth. At times we will injure ourselves and suffer the pain. And I think there are various forms and causes of suffering. There's internal suffering, which can sometimes be suffering that we experience ourselves for various reasons. Then there's external suffering, which is suffering caused by somebody else that's causing you that suffering. There's spiritual suffering. It's very difficult to try and nail down how you can stop suffering. Okay, I feel that the closer you walk with God, personally, I think there is suffering, because I think it's part of the human condition, like I said. But I think the peace that you get from placing your faith in God, in some respects, alleviates that suffering, which is ironic, given that the one person who suffered, in my opinion, more. I'm not trying to compete with people suffering, okay? But I just want to say that if you were to encapsulate every different form of suffering you can think of, Jesus experienced it in those 24 hours on the Passion. He experienced the suffering of all mankind. And I don't think there's any suffering that a human being has experienced that Jesus didn't suffer. Humiliation, embarrassment, physical pain, everything. Betrayal.
Yeah.
I mean,
the worst one of all, I think.
Worst betrayal.
Yeah.
And then being an innocent man accused of something that you've not done.
Yeah, and also to all the atheists out there who'll be listening and kind of be wanting to tune out at this point, even if you believe that, think to yourself, it's still historically accurate. There's more evidence of Jesus existing than Julius Caesar. Like, this happened. It's well recorded, well documented that Jesus did die on the cross and he did go through these things. The question is for you, well, did he rise again? That's the big question. But it's without a doubt he went through a torturous suffering beyond the realm of even understanding, really.
So, for atheists, again, why would anybody want to glorify or accentuate suffering? If you look at any glorious film, there's a period of suffering. But why is it that as Christians, and why do people of faith have this respect for this man who suffered? Okay, it doesn't make sense. If you want to, everybody likes heroes, don't they? And heroes go through a certain amount of pain. But for us to actually focus on this suffering doesn't make sense from a reasoning point of view. And for us to be infatuated with a man who died and suffered, if you're an atheist and you are based in reason, it doesn't make sense. So why are we like this? It's because it's faith. As I've said, faith is the opposite of reason. You can't use the one or the other to actually clarify the other. The point I want to make is that the suffering that Jesus endured on the cross was so great, and I want to read you an account, if I may. And I think this is important because when you understand the suffering that this man went through, I think it puts into perspective the suffering that we all have to endure. And maybe there is something in understanding that good can come out of suffering. I actually believe that the suffering that that's happened in my life has made me a better person. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and I don't want anybody to suffer. But the suffering that I think I endured in my life through the periods of time, when I look back and I think, I really don't want to go through that period of time again. Those were the times when, as some people say, my roots grew stronger. I became a stronger person. I became someone who was able to empathize. And I think if you suffer, if you felt pain and you see somebody else feeling pain, oh my goodness, can you empathize? If you don't suffer, then I think there is this inability for people, or if you try to sort of cause suffering to others, it's anyway. I want to just read this little article which I thought was really interesting, and it's made me realise just what occurred on that cross. I'm sorry if I'm over-labouring this, but I think it's important. So basically, at the time of the crucifixion, crucifixion was the worst death. Only the worst criminals were condemned to be crucified. Yet it was even more dreadful for Jesus. Unlike other criminals condemned to death by crucifixion, Jesus was actually nailed to the cross. They were strung up. They were tied to the cross. He was nailed to the cross. They really hated him. They really wanted to make him suffer. Okay, and these were 6 to 8 inch nails. The nails were driven into the wrist, not into his palms, as is commonly portrayed. There's a tendon in the wrist that extends to the shoulder. The Roman guards knew that when the nails were being hammered into the wrist, the tendons would tear and break, forcing Jesus to use his back muscles to support him so that he could breathe. both of his feet were nailed together, from what I understand, in through the ankle. Okay. Thus, he was forced to support himself on the single nail that impaled his feet to the cross. Jesus could not support himself with his legs because of the pain, so he was forced to alternate between arching his back, then using his legs just to continue to breathe. So imagine the struggle, the pain, the suffering, and the courage to stand there without screaming in pain. Jesus endured this reality for 3 hours. Okay. I mean, if I get a toothache, I'm like, I'm in bits. I'm in bits within a couple of minutes. Yeah. I'm all over the place. Yes, over 3 hours. Can you imagine the kind of suffering? A few minutes before he died, Jesus stopped bleeding. He was simply pouring water from his wounds. From common images, we see wounds to his side and his hands. There's a bit I want to speak about. Prior to him being crucified, he was beaten with a cat of nine tails. Now, that's just not flails of leather. It had pieces of metal, tooth, whatever, sharp things. They actually stripped his skin off him. It hit his face so badly, it stripped his beard from his face. And the crown of thorns that impaled his head, actually dug in. Okay, so basically, this man was beaten, almost skinned alive, then hung up on a cross for 3 hours. The worst humiliation, and I just want to say this as the final point, and I've only recently discovered this. So Jesus cried out, and they decided to give him some water. So what they did was they put some sponge into the into vinegar, and gave the sponge. Now, ask yourself, why was there a sponge and why was there a bowl of vinegar there? Why? Do you know what it was used for? Romans used to wipe their asses with it. Oh, God. They would use a sponge dipped in water and vinegar to wipe their bums with. Oh. And they put that on his face to drink.
Oh, you can't even it's so horrific. You can't even begin to. One nail in one hand, one wrist. That's enough to, make any man in absolute fucking torture, agony, and to do that, but also to be noble and stoic in doing that.
And to say, Jesus, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Jesus is the most aspirational person who's ever lived, ever, regardless of what you think. I always give it the caveat, because I know there's atheists who listen, but it is the most aspirational thing to show that much love, kindness, but also strength, stoicism, and to encompass all of that in one human being or God, to live like that, to be the kind of quintessential embodiment of balanced in every respect. To act to be balanced, to its core. Jesus was the definition of almost, I always say balanced, but he was perfect, because he balanced everything somehow. Strong without being prideful, or gentle without being weak, or just all these things. It's so difficult to have. Nobody has all of them. You meet people, they're strong, then you find out they're prideful or they're egotistical. You meet people who are weak and you find out they're timid, or they're not brave, or they're not whatever. To be everything is beyond the realm of comprehension. And just think about last time someone did something to you, last time someone hates you, last time someone did something in your back, and the ravaged anger you have towards them, and just wanting to, punch them, or all these things. And then to think, imagine that person would stripped you down, humiliated you, and you had an opportunity to do something and you don't. And that's the virtue, when you can do something but you choose not to.
He had the chance for Pilate to release him. Pilate didn't want to. Pilate, if anybody knows, Pilate was the governor of Judea, who was responsible for the crucifixion. Now, he didn't want to crucify Jesus, but it was the Jews that wanted to crucify him, and that's what happened. Look, we're talking about this in the context of suffering. Okay,
can I just add on Pilate? Pilate's the embodiment of a weak man, because he washed his hands of it, and I think this is something that's really relevant today with issues or things that happen. People don't want to make the buck stop with them. They want to pass it over to someone else. I wash my hands of it.
Very good point.
I just no, it's their problem. When actually, there are things worth fighting for. There are things worth dying for, and you can't just wash your hands of something. That doesn't God knows your intent. There is a moral law to things, and there is a kind of action behind. No, there is a reaction behind your actions, and he was the embodiment of the weakness of mankind, of giving in, of I know it's wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway, or I know it's bad, but I'm just going to free myself of it. That kind of
absolve myself. Yeah. I've got nothing to do with this. It's not
lack of responsibility.
It's nothing to do with me. He also represents government, okay? Because Caesar represented the government of Rome. Caesar represented the power of Rome, and it was funny enough. It was the Romans who invented this way of killing somebody. Okay, this is what gets me when I watch these historic programs. I mean, the ability of human beings to inflict pain and suffering on other human beings is unbelievable. It just is beyond my comprehension. I was reading an interesting article about how people always talk positively about the native Indians, okay, and how they were a peaceful, loving group of people. Now, what people don't realise is that when they went to war, or when they fought amongst each other, or when there was a squabble, they did horrific things to each other. They weren't nice. And there's this kind of slightly romanticism of the old times, and that people were more kind, more people more kind, more gentle, more caring, and that it's just modern people that are the problem. Well, you know what? Before Jesus, and for many hundreds of years after Jesus, and especially amongst those people who didn't know Jesus or weren't Christian, the level of suffering that was caused in the world by these ancient peoples was horrendous, absolutely horrific. Then we get to a big problem, which I struggle with enormously, which is that you would have thought that a Christian or that Christians, having witnessed the suffering of their God on a cross, would do everything to stop suffering in the world, wouldn't we? And yet, I have to say that the Roman Catholic Church, the churches, the powers that took over Jesus's legacy, burning at the stake, the Inquisition, the torturing. I mean, I don't understand how that can be done in the name of Jesus. How can that be? And this is a big problem for us because, we like washing our hands. Most people, if the problem's too difficult, you wash your hands off it and you walk away. Okay. And what that allows is it allows those wicked people who will use a good cause and turn it into a bad cause for them to control other people, and that is what has happened. Yeah. Okay.
All that is needed for evil to flourish is for good men to sit back and do nothing.
And that is happening now. It is happening now. If you don't believe me, I'll get to that point in a minute. It is happening right now, but it has happened throughout history. And what has happened is that bad men have taken over. And this is a real issue for me because as a Christian, I have to face up to people coming to me and saying to me, quite rightly, but look at the popes, look what they did to people, look at what was done in the name of Christianity. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. This is why I say to people, before you start accusing Christians of doing these things, just think for a moment what happened to Jesus. Jesus came down, and as a Christian, I believe that God, the power of creation, made this man. Okay, the reason he made this man was because we were heading to a place where we didn't deserve to carry on living, and a flood or some sort of horrible event would have happened had it not been that Jesus was able to free us from this. Jesus was killed because he said one thing. He said, "I am the Son of God." In fact, he is the Son of God, and we believe in a Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So he was God incarnate in human form. Okay. Now, he appeared to the people who actually introduced us to God in the first place, which is the Jewish people, because through Moses, who God had revealed himself to, and most of the religion, well, Islam and Christianity, come from the Mosaic law, and it was Moses's legacy that came down to the Jews, but they'd constantly misunderstood the message of God. And what they'd done is they'd created a whole system of rules, which is Leviticus. Okay, the priests who ran their faith, their religion, it was all based on rules. If you do this on Sabbath, you can't wash your face on the Sabbath. You can't do this. You can't
stone a woman.
I mean, there's a whole bizarre list of questions.
Endorsement of genocide.
Yeah. Can you break an egg on a Sabbath? So strict Jews stick to these things, and when the Sabbath comes, they just lie around and don't do anything. Fair enough. We're told to rest. I haven't got a problem with that. So here's a situation where a man comes down to the Jews and says, "I am the Son of God." And they all look at him askance and say, "You're what?" And not only does he say that, but he starts to do things that almost make them stop and think, because he heals people. He's kindness and love incarnate. He talks wisely to them. He says beautiful things, and he teaches them about this amazing kingdom that is the kingdom of God, not what they've created, not this bizarre kind of legalistic system. Isn't it funny? Legalistic system. They had created a legal system. The Jews created a legal system which they called their religion. So Judaism is based on legality. Legality is you can do this, you can't do this. If you do this, you're a bad man. If you there's a whole list. It's a massive list of things you can and can't do. Jesus turned around and said, "That's not what it's about. I want to place that list on your heart. The things you do that are right and wrong are based on one principle. Treat others as you would have them treat you." It's as simple as that. Yeah. And if you love other people, treat them with love. And the more love you give, the more love you get back. Okay? Jesus was killed not by the Romans, not by the Jews, although they were the people inhabiting that place, but he was killed by the concept of religion.
Yeah.
That's what killed him. And that, at the moment, we have a religion in this land, and it's called government. So I'm getting political, but that's where I'm going with this. I'm going where, if any of you are sitting there, washing your hands of what you know you should be doing, because you know in your heart that something has been done that's wrong to people on any level, if you know it's been wrong, then you need to start to stand up, take a look at yourself, and say, what am I going to do to make the world a better place? And if everybody stood up and did that, would we have a better world?
Amen. Yeah,
I think we
completely. And I think, what you said about religion, I think, speaks to a lot of people. And that's why I know that there'll be people who listen to this who never gone to church in their lives, would never classify themselves as Christian. But now maybe they're thinking, well, maybe actually I do, because they've been taught this doctrine of like, oh, you have to go to church, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then you're Christian, then you got the blue tick, then you got a tick in the box. And you, Steve, changed my world when you told me that stuff years ago, because I was always been a Christian, but I never really was that forefront in it. I was like, I would say I was Christian at Christian values and stuff.
Yeah.
And I loved the kind of like what Christianity was about and the values of it, but I was never, there was a bit of like, well, I'm not Christian, I don't go to church and stuff. And then you open my world up. It's about what you do, how you treat people, what you do day to day. These are the questions that makes one a Christian, not ticking a box. And it's also to do with rules. Like, rules in Christianity aren't, you're not doing a rule because it's a rule. You're doing it to serve God, and you're doing that rule because that you think that most best honours God. It's not like, oh, right or wrong, let me do the rule. There's a big difference, and I think some Christians get caught up. It's on both sides. There's some Christians who are like, well, it means nothing to be Christian. You can just do whatever, have a good time. But then in practice, what does it even mean to be Christian if there are no rules? And then on the opposite side, there's people who are so caught up in rules that they actually miss the meaning of why they're doing rules. It becomes a new religion within the rules of like, you follow this, you follow this. Like at school, it's not about like learning or blossoming as a human being. It's simply about following a rule. Then people become prideful and virtuous of it. It's about honouring God and serving God within it. So it's all about intent. C.S. Lewis talks about it brilliantly, about how the intent is what makes things moral, not the actual act itself. Like for instance, that he uses the example of like a stripper almost, of how like a stripper, until they know what they're doing is truly wrong, they are doing something wrong objectively, because there is an objective moral law, but the intent of the person in the eyes of God anyway is different because they don't know it's wrong. It is wrong, and I would say that's wrong, for instance, to people to sell their bodies. I think it's incredibly wrong and disgusting, and it's wrecking society in so much. But it's the actual intent of the individual that I think is in kind of the eyes of the beholder of God, and that's why we talk about Pontius Pilate and stuff, of how that is the embodiment of weakness, of a weak man who knows what he's doing is wrong, but he won't take responsibility for the wrong action, and that is what is wrong, not like ticking a box. It's when you know something's wrong and you do it anyway. That's
cowardice.
Yeah.
He was a coward because they said to him, why are you... Because he said, this man says he's king. He's king. And he said, well, there's no other king than Caesar. And if you don't crucify this man, then Caesar's going to realise. So he was covering his arse as well. There's a lot of arse covering here. Pontius Pilate was like, well, okay, right, well, let's crucify him.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with me. I'm washing my hands of this.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about Christianity, and this is what really upsets me. Jesus didn't say, go to church. Jesus didn't say, and if I've got this wrong, please come and show me where Jesus said, if you don't go to church, you're a bad person. Okay? What he did was he showed us a methodology of living. It's as simple as that. I've got a really good friend of mine, Paul, who actually struggles with faith. He doesn't have faith in God. But I say to him, you're the best non-Christian Christian I know, because his values are just amazing. And so you've got humanists, okay, who are atheists, who try to live a Christian life, or how can I put this? They try to live a moral life. Okay?
However, I mean, within that though, like Jordan Peterson, he struggles with saying he actually believes in God, and he got asked recently, do you believe in God? And he said, look at my actions. He didn't say yes or no, he just said that. And we could say that guy is a Christian.
Yeah.
Because what does belief mean? If belief is like, I believe in it, then that means fuck all. Like, I could be doing nothing and just believe in it. It means nothing, but actions speak louder than words. So therefore, that man, he is a Christian, even if he's in denial.
Yeah.
You could argue that. Really,
absolutely. And it's not about what you say; it's about what you do in many respects. And it's like Jordan Peterson says, look at my actions. I have to say, I don't know. I can't say 100% whether I believe in God.
Yeah.
Okay. I know in my heart, and I feel that there is something really amazing about this world, and that it was created, and that there is something amazing, and I can only feel that God is responsible for this. Look at it from this point of view. Every single tribal group, since time immemorial, it would appear that human beings have had a desire to worship something, okay, because they know there's something that is above them. There is a higher being, okay, and I think it's important that we don't get mixed up with what people do to make you think that you have to do this in order to be this. Okay, what I'm saying is, you don't have to go to church. You don't have to do what anybody says. God gave us freedom of will. What Jesus said is, when you use that freedom of will to do good for others, then the world is a better place. So you shouldn't have to do, just because someone says. So if I'm correcting a child, okay, the worst thing a father, I think, can do is to set rules that don't make sense, okay, because a child will see through that. What you want is the child to want to obey you, because they can see the benefit of doing that. And the point I wanted to make about humanists was they say, why do you need Jesus? Because we just have to treat each other better. Okay, fine, I get that. But it's a first world issue, isn't it? Because where did they get that moral code from to start with? Okay, so it's always brilliant when people stand on the shoulders of giants and ignore the giant they're standing on and try and pretend that they are the ones who invented this, when actual fact it was already there from the start from Jesus. It's like manifestation, like I've said. People like going to manifestation. Well, Jesus said that. When you pray, imagine you already have it. There's nothing new about that, guys.
Yeah, no, spot on. And I recently watched a debate with Dr. Craig and Christopher Hitchens. Highly suggest.
Oh, wow.
Does God exist? Fantastic debate. Some of the great, big scholars, like intellectuals. It's fantastic. Dr. Craig's amazing, and he makes a great point in how, the atheist argument is that our morals are who we are, what is good and what is bad is predicated on biology, or we know what's right. But this logic doesn't extend to certain ways. So in Saudi Arabia or a certain country, this culture is deemed okay, or this culture is deemed good or virtuous, or whatever. So it's completely if that's the thesis and bedrock of what is I don't know where it's there we go. I don't it's weird. I'm turning it by now. If the bedrock of what is good or right based on culture and things of that nature, then it for instance, tomorrow, if our culture changed and it said rape was okay and it became not illegal and was promoted, then it would be okay. According to this logic of moral law, it's just predicated on that. But Dr. Craig's argument and what we're saying, which is basically there are things that are intrinsic that have been passed down by God that we know are wrong or right based on this. It's like chickens rape other chickens, or animals do acts that we deem are immoral because I believe anyway that what we know is right or wrong is based from God. But a lot of people with the atheist argument extends to culture. It can so easily be dismantled. And I would suggest do watch that debate because it's fantastic. And Christopher Hitchens, someone who I thought would be really good, and I'd watch me oh shit, because he's the guy who's converted so many people to atheism. And after watching it, I was like, is that it? I was expecting to be wowed and oh my goodness. And after
it's an empty argument. They don't have an argument.
I mean, it's really something where you see this kind of powerhouse guy who's hyped up so much. You see him talk to Dr. Craig, who is fantastic, by the way. He did a phenomenal job. He completely dismantles him. So do check that out. It's like a 2.5 hour debate. Does God exist? I became more Christian by the end, and I thought I'd become more pessimistic. But speaking about suffering and kind of to people out there who are suffering, what's kind of your message, would you say?
I would say that, first of all, my heart goes out to you if you are suffering. I have a situation in my family where my cousin's son is suffering from this pain that they can't work out, and the pain is so bad that he's absolutely screaming in agony, screaming. He's only 13. They don't know what's causing it. It's a non-specific pain, but it's severe pain, so much so that he's in agony. My heart goes out to him. I'm trying to use every ounce. My partner and I, she works in a therapy environment. She's got a lot of experience in naturopathic healing. We're trying to find a way of healing him. And right now, I am utterly flummoxed. I'm completely lost because I don't know what to do to alleviate his suffering. And this is where I sometimes cry out to God. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say, God, what is your purpose in this? This beautiful boy, he's 13, he's angelic, he's the sweetest kid. And he's suffering in a way that I can't even imagine. Okay? Why? And I wish I could say to you, I wish I could give you that answer. And this is the 10, 15% in me which questions, is there a God? And I got every respect for people who say to me, how can you believe in a God when you look at the suffering in this world? And people say to me, how did God allow his son to suffer? Sorry.
Yeah. And what about that? So I watched a recent Sam Harris thing, and he spoke about how every minute, I think, every day, I think 24,000 kids die from causes of like cancer, natural disasters. And if you put that into perspective, that's, I think, 1,000 kids. Yeah, 1,000 kids every single hour. So it's either God is watching thousands of kids suffer, he's allowing that, or he can do something but is doing nothing. Like, what is it, you know? And also within that, there's a question of like, well, I can't remember. Oh yeah, about prayer. And this is a big question. It's like, out of those 24,000 kids, a majority of them will be religious, because statistically majority of people are, in some respects, not definitely Christian, but Muslim, Sikh, whatever. So that means that maybe, let's say 70% are praying. Well, let's say even like all of them are praying. You've got 24,000 parents praying. If one of them is cured or saved, we say, well, that's God. He saved them. But if 23,999 of them perish, we don't say, well, God just killed them or let them die. But we attribute all of the credit, but none of the... And he made it sound like it's like playing tennis without the net. Like, one principle is used for one thing, but it's not used for the other. It's
very powerful, very powerful, and I can't deny that. All I can say is that none of us, you know, when you quote numbers, it obfuscates the actual objective that you're trying to discuss, because as soon as you bring statistics in it, you don't know the basis of what caused that cancer. You don't know the detail in it. Okay, and so it's very easy to bring out numbers and make comments like that, and of course people like Sam Harris would do that. You know, atheists love their numbers. They love facts and figures. So far as I'm concerned, there's only one area where there are facts, and that is mathematics. Everything else is a theory. It's an idea. Very few of them, unless they're observable, are provable. Theories are not provable. They're theories. That's why it's a theory. So what Sam Harris is giving you is a theory. Okay, and it's a cogent theory. He's basically saying if 22,000 children die a day, is that what he's saying? 24,000 die every day.
It's like 1,000 an hour.
Out of 8 billion people on the planet. It's heartbreaking, and you go, oh my God. Oh. But when you put it into perspective of out of how many people there are, and how many of those are deaths that have occurred because they've eaten something they shouldn't have eaten, they've been poisoned by something, we don't know the detail. We don't know the detail. And so that's why those kind of arguments don't hold up. You can't, you know, lie. There's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. Okay, so I'm not disputing the fact that all these thousands of children are dying. What I'm saying is that you've got to look at it each on a personal level. You can't say God is responsible for all of this. I've got a friend of mine, and she is atheist because a friend of hers died in a car accident, and she believed that God was responsible for that. Okay, what do I say? What do I say to someone who is so kind of filled with this desire to blame someone that they blame God? Okay, blame God. But what people completely forget is that God loves us so much that he doesn't want to control us, which is why I am happy to say I don't have 100% belief in God. If I did, I would be brainwashed.
You'd be deluded.
I'd be deluded.
Okay? Religious delusion.
It is healthy to have a cynicism.
Yeah.
it's
is part of faith.
Doubt is part of faith.
Because if not, you're living in fairyland, religious delusion.
Well, you're living in a cult.
Yeah, because you're not. And to people who do think that, you're not exposing yourself. You're not opening your mind. I'm sorry. If you have absolute certainty God exists, zero doubt at all, have you really listened to theological arguments both for and against? Have you dabbled in these massive philosophical questions and really, really understood? Because there's some of the smartest people on both sides. There's some incredible theologians, incredible smart people. There's also incredible people on the other side. And to just outright dismiss and have absolute certainty, are you really certain, or are you deluded, or do you want that to be true? big difference.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I mean this is the issue. Just going back to atheism, the thing that gets me is I watched an interesting interview where this preacher said atheism has killed more people than anything else. Okay, and this young guy who he was talking to called him the most revolting words. He was really rude to this guy for saying that, and then the preacher turned around and said to him, "Okay, well, what about Mao Zedong? What about Stalin?" And he named all these people who were atheists, and he said Mao Zedong killed 40 million. 100 million. Stalin killed 40 million, okay? And these were atheists. These were proclaimed atheists. They hated God. And this is the problem we've got in our world right now, where the lessening of faith and what they're trying to do, what the atheists and these people who want to control us are trying to do, is they don't want us to have faith. Because faith will destroy them. They can't handle faith. It's like the dark can't handle the light. Mm-hmm. So if what the dark has to do is extinguish the light. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this is what's happening right now. We are trying to be extinguished, and people like us with faith, when we try and bring the light of love into the world, and the reason that atheists have killed so many people is because they don't value people. God created every single human being. He created us for a purpose, okay? And that purpose is for us to live a life and enjoy this beautiful world that he's given us. That's how much his creative love is. He is the essence of love.
Yeah.
And atheists forget that.
Yeah, I think...
How can you... I want to ask an atheist, how can you prove love? Prove love to me without action.
Yeah.
Without action.
Yeah.
Prove love to me without action. And if you can do that, then you can prove that, that God doesn't exist.
Yeah. No,
simple.
It's absolutely spot on. And I think what you said there about, I had it so well in my head.
I know, it's trouble. We have the ideas and then it goes. Yeah,
I had it in my head a lot. Well, no, what you said about atheism, like people say, religion's killed loads of people. And yeah, it's killed loads of people. Right? But within that, if an atheist does something, you go, that atheist just killed. If someone who doesn't believe in God murders someone, you don't go, oh my goodness, all these atheists killing people. But if it's religion, it's like, hang on, he's religious, unbelievable.
Like, so can I just add something to that? People kill in the name of religion. Now, if as a Christian, I have no ability to kill anybody.
Yeah,
I have no desire. Whatever they do. Although there are some people, Matt Hancock, who I really don't like, okay, Klaus Schwab, a few others, Bill Gates.
Fishy Rishi.
There's a whole lot of people that I really, really don't like. And, and you know what? In the old days, it's like, well, just kill him. Just kill him, okay? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. I don't believe. Whereas if you have that ability to kill someone, then there's something distinctly wrong with you. You are not a Christian. If you kill anybody, you are not a Christian. So any of you who turn around and say to me, religion killed all these people. No, it didn't. Religion didn't. It was the use of religion.
Yeah.
And the people who exercised those powers in the name of religion, okay, they weren't Christians. They weren't. I can tell you now, they are not Christian. And it's like you were saying, your actions speak louder than your words.
Yeah. Look at a man's actions, don't look at what he says. Yeah. And I think it's in the debate that I watched between Craig and Hitchens, it was fantastic because Craig was like, "Give me an argument for atheism." I don't know why it's. He would say, "Give me an argument for atheism," because Craig would come up with, scientific, theological arguments, philosophical arguments for the creation of the universe, science. But then Christopher Hitchens' go-to was like, God's bollocks. But obviously he expanded more than that. Yeah, but instead of him using evidence to prove there's nothing, his assumption is, and this is the atheist from me kind of listening to Sam Harris, Dawkins, and all these kind of big atheist minds, is they believe that you don't need to prove atheism. Atheism is the default, but you have to prove God. But what I say to that is, there are people who have used evidence and arguments that God exists, but if you use the same thing with atheism, evidence that God doesn't exist, then not many people actually come up with that. They just think, well, that's the default. You have to do the work.
Okay.
And then when religious people do the work, they say, oh, well, you're this, you're that. There's one work on one side, but there's not the same.
Absolutely. And you get this. This is why I say veganism and atheism are first world luxuries. Okay. So if you want to use the basis of nihilism, which is the default setting, okay, look at those people who live on the edge. Okay. Look at people who live in the periphery who don't have the luxuries in our lives. Look at tribal people. Look at people who live on a basal level. Okay. And analyze what happens there. First of all, they eat meat. All right. You can't survive if you don't eat meat. Right. 2, they have some form of belief in a higher being. All of them. Okay. And the old saying is, on a battlefield, no one says, oh, I'm going to die and I'm not going to cry out to God. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to die because I've got nothing to cry out to. I'm in pain. I'm in suffering. And I want to see if atheists say, "Oh God, oh Jesus." Oh, I'd love to know if they bash their toe. Do they say, "Oh God," So what I'm saying is that when you're in pain, when you are suffering, when you have nothing else, who do you cry out to? Who do you cry? And Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, Sam Harris. Are they? I'd love to see when their time comes.
Oh my goodness!
When their time comes, when they're facing the abyss of eternity, okay, are they just going to say, "Well, I just disappear into this darkness"? Really? Good. Then, if you feel that, I wish you all the very best. Because for me, I know and I feel in just by the fact that I have accepted the existence of God. Because I've accepted that, I can bathe in his love. I can feel his love. I can feel his love flow through me. When I became a born-again Christian, I experienced physically God's love. And I've seen the result of prayer. I've seen prayer work time and time and time again. And if you don't believe me, and if you are an atheist, and if you're a person struggling with faith, all I'll say to you is that instead of trying to reason it, instead of trying to use your amazing brain to try and work out God, because you will never work God out. It's too big for our brains. You have to think with your heart, okay, which is the biggest brain we've got, believe it or not. When you come to God in a state of childlike innocence and say, do you know what? I'm humbling myself because I don't know. But I want you to show me. When you do that, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What happens?
Yeah, absolutely powerful. So powerful. And with people like Sam Harris and stuff, I think, if you even extrapolate their arguments to what they mean, let's say God doesn't exist, for certain God doesn't exist. And often when you actually grill down to these people, does God certainly, they say, well, I need evidence that God does exist. They want certainty on God existing, but they also are hesitant to say they definitively, even though they say they're atheists. So even some of the biggest kind of atheist powerhouses, even they are kind of tampering on it. And to think that kind of, billions and billions of people across the years, endless miracles, it's all just complete nonsense. Every single person, billions and billions of people, the way people live, all of that, just to think, which has withstood the test of time, that has principles, morals, and virtues that are timeless, contextually timeless, and to think it's all just happened to be bollocks, and there is nothing. To really think that is something. I struggle how people get to the conclusion that there might be, and that's why a lot of people are agnostic. And to people who say that, fair enough, because it's a big question. It's something to really kind of understand. But I think when people are agnostic, a lot of that is they're scared to be called Christian because they feel like they're not a good Christian or whatever, or also they're scared to say they're Christian because there's this kind of doctrine of, you can't doubt, or you have to be 100% certain, because there's all these religious delusional people out there, and you kind of get in your mind you need to be 100% certain about things, when actually, it's like the more you know, the more little you know, right?
Yeah.
And that principle is applied to religion as well. It's not like, oh, so I become Christian, I find out more, and then I realize, all right, sorted it, mate. Because if you think you're not really testing your brain. Like, anyone who thinks they have things figured out of like these massive, massive issues where there's so many paths you can go with these questions. There's so many arguments. There's so many like theological things to really wrestle with. If you think, oh, got that sorted, you haven't. I don't believe you've done enough work, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I had something to say and I've completely forgotten what I was going to say.
Classic.
It's always the way. It's always the way. Sorry. It's going back to suffering. I think suffering is an important part of Christianity. Funnily enough, of faith. That's what I was going to say. When you're talking about people not wanting to describe themselves as Christian, I went through a phase recently where I was kind of slightly embarrassed to call myself a Christian because of the kind of bad press that Christians are getting, and Christians don't help themselves. The one thing that Christians do, which I've done in the past, which is really not helpful, is when we start judging people and we start saying things like, "You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that." We're having a discussion. I'm not judging atheists. I'm comparing the difference of thinking with atheists. But when you start to judge people or start to behave in a Christian way, which isn't supported by your behaviour, or what I find with a lot of Christians is, like, I posted something about Easter, okay, and I got all these people coming telling me that it's Ishtar, and by the way, that was
followed your Facebook.
The god. Oh no, the god that I was talking about that was born on the 24th of December was Nimrod. Okay, so Nimrod was meant to have been born on the 24th of December, and so then people say things like, "Oh well, we are, we're worshipping Nimrod, not God." But the point I want to make is that I got to the point where I was trying to find a different term for Christian, because what also I find is that there are an awful lot of Christians who just, it's slightly cringy. Just try and be a Christian rather than try to act like a Christian. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's part of the struggle I have with the Christian faith. But it's an intrinsic part that when you are suffering, you asked me right at the beginning, when someone is suffering, what is my response? And I will say to you, if you're suffering, call out to God. Because funnily enough, it's not until you reach a point in your life where all your amazing reasoning, where all your ability to create moralistic arguments, there comes a point in your life when you will suffer something. And deep within you, there will be this scream which will call out for God. And instead of suppressing it, and I suspect that when people suppress that, the suffering continues. Okay, when you suppress that, if you lift that pain up to God, Jesus said, "Give me your burden, let me carry it." Okay, where you're in pain, give it to me. God will take our pain. He will take our suffering. Don't believe me? Give it a go. But you have to do it in a way that's not like, it's not supercilious. And it's like, oh, well, here you go. Take that. You take that pain. You've got to devoutly, in a way, just lift it up and say, Lord, I'm suffering. I really am in pain. Whatever's happening in my life, I want you to heal me. When I was going through that really bad time in my life following my divorce, I've explained it like, and if any of you men who've been divorced and women who've been divorced, it's like I describe it like a tortoise having its shell ripped off it, because you and that person were together, you were attached, you were one being, and then when you split up, you literally tear away from each other. Depending, especially if it's been 15, 16, 20, 30 years. My marriage was 16 years, and it was a very painful experience. I'm saying my ex-wife would have experienced that as well, not just me. I'm commiserating for her, because it was the end of something that was special. I describe it as having open heart surgery because obviously your heart is where
Without
the
the
pain is.
anaesthetic.
Yeah, without the anaesthetic.
Yeah.
And I've said that
Oh,
before.
God.
And so the one thing I used to do was pray, pray, pray. And when I prayed, I felt better. I felt I could do. In the mornings, I used to put worship music on. Okay, there was a particular song that I used to play every morning. And even now when I hear it, I get that horrible anxiety feeling that I used to get then. But I prayed and I prayed and I asked God. And I said to God, help me through this suffering to become a better man. Okay, because I believe that suffering improves us. And I'm not trying to say that in some sort of like,
Motivational.
haughty way
Yeah.
to try and make you feel insignificant. It's not that. I'm trying to say to you that when you allow the suffering to change you. So my response to suffering is that, like my cousin's son, I honestly don't know. I'd love to get to the bottom of what that is, and it could just be something that someone gave him or he took or something, or
when he had a shower, a bath, like maybe there's some chemical from the spray.
Yeah, is it external? Is it internal? Is it spiritual? Is it and let's not forget, I've talked about the spiritual side of demonic possession, and we call it mental health issues. There's more to that. Yes, there can be brain chemistry issues, but there are also, we live in a spiritual world, and this is why it's so important to understand this. So
yeah, I think with what you said about prayer and stuff, I think one thing and I spoke about this on the past episode of how if everyone's praying for something, not everything can come true to an extent, in the way of like, if I'm praying for like, I don't know, it could be, because ripple effects is a real thing. Like if I'm praying for money and I get money, that me getting money could be at the cost of someone who's feeding their kids, and then their kid gets ill because they're not eating enough, and then because our terrible healthcare system, because of greed, then they're not getting treated, and then they die. Like endless ripples. We can't even possibly even picture the ripples. Or I pray to be early for work, so I drive really quick, and as I'm driving, the light of my car shines on someone, and then they get in a crash. I don't even know that. And then because of the ripple effect of that, then this happens to them. This, like someone in my church said to me, and it did help me a lot. They said like, the way he looks at prayer is like sewing. One side you see all this thing, it looks so weird, it looks pretty tacky. Then you turn it over, it all makes sense. Why it looks, but on one side it's like, what is going on? And I think there's so many things we can't even fathom. So like infinity, right? We can't picture that. We're like, that our brains can't comprehend what that is. Things that don't end. We can't fathom.
We don't have the ability to understand.
We don't.
No.
So, but there's the assumption with prayer or miracles that we should know that. But we haven't even found. We can't even fathom the end or infinity. We can't even get our minds around that. Why would we be able to get our minds around?
So I came to the conclusion relatively recently that, and I've spoken about this, if you try and do things in your own strength, you're doing. I'm trying to find an analogy. If someone says to me, right, Steve, just carry on, and you need to carry on in this path because we've got to put all these lines in a straight line, okay? Because there is a reason for this, okay? If I veer off and start doing the wrong thing because I decide I don't want to do that, I don't know what difficulty I'm going to cause for other people.
Yeah.
So if, for example, I determine that I'm going to make more money than other people and do unscrupulous things, or at least make money in a way that is not good, what is the damage I do? If I live my life in a certain way, which I think so this is what people do, and this is why the world is so screwed, because people are motivated by achievement. So they will do, and it's like it's almost pushed into you. You must do what you must do to become successful.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is, because they're sort of programmed to do this, they work to make themselves successful and force themselves onto the situation. What I learned when I came to faith was that I have to let things unfold. Okay, if, for example, I had decided to carry on in the path of financial services and decided that I'll go on and become a very wealthy man because I was determined to become a wealthy man, I've often said to people, if that had happened, I don't think I'd be around. I think I'd be dead. I honestly think, because I think the risks I would have taken, the things I would have done, I think my hedonism at that point of drinking too much and, living a hedonistic lifestyle, I think I'd be dead. I really do.
Wow.
And I think God has a wonderful way of letting you get what is sufficient for your needs. Don't ask for more. Don't be greedy. Don't try and force your world to fit into what you want to do. When you do that, the ripple effect causes effects on others.
Yeah.
If I be and say to God, you know what, God, I trust you. I'll let you bring these things. Then in the right time, when he set everything up so that it can come to me, it comes to me. And I'm telling you now, Rory, I look back on my life and he's answered all my prayers.
Wow.
He's answered my prayers.
Wow. That's
okay.
Crazy.
I look back at my life and I'm thinking, do you know, it's like the job I do. I prayed for a job like this about 8 years ago. Wow. I prayed for the job and I suddenly, a couple of days ago, I was thinking, do you know what? I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do.
Wow.
It's really interesting, and there's things I'm praying for in the future. And I in 10 years' time, I'd love to be able to turn around to you and say, actually, Rory, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
So
no, that is. I think you really. That will speak to a lot of people what you said, and about the ripple effect that you spoke about. I thought about there's some people I've worked with who there was someone who was a literal sociopath, and he was like I've never like. And I didn't realise till I left properly that how bad this person was. I won't say who it is. No one will know because they're not famous, but they've worked with famous people. They're kind of behind the scenes. People don't know them, but really, I found out that there was a person I used to work with who got completely abused by them. As in didn't get paid properly. They scammed a bunch. They did really horrible things. They mentally abused him. And for over 2.5 years, didn't let him take a single day off. Really disturbing how they treated him. It's like a broken kid, to be honest. And I thought to myself, we were talking about this ripple effect. Because he's like that, right? Let's say he goes and kills himself, right? One of his friends will then experience him kill themselves and get depressed. And then people wonder, oh, why is he depressed, right? Because his friend killed himself. But why did that happen? Because this guy's a sociopath and he's backstabbed him. And why did he do that? Because his dad treated him bad as a kid. And why did he do that? Because they didn't have money. And then it goes on and on and on. And I think sometimes that we don't ever see that because it's difficult to really see that, to think, why am I depressed? Why am I this? Why am I that? When actually it could be man-made in the sense of the reason that is because this guy absolutely ruined him, and that's going to have an effect on his friend who has no clue of this guy. He has absolutely no clue of who he is, but because of him, he's feeling depressed and wants to die. And you could even extrapolate it to natural disasters and I've thought about this with tsunamis, earthquakes. People say, oh, well, how do all these things happen? And it's a good point. It's a massive theological why if it's natural. But if you look at earthquakes or hurricanes in places like Florida or places, it's devastating. But if that same thing happens somewhere like China or some cities, the devastation is far less because there's more infrastructure, there's been more investment, because there's been less kind of lobbied contracts, there's been better investment into building houses, more strong foundations, so less people die. Or there could be preventative measures, but because there's certain money isn't designated by humans, the impact's going to be massive. Or healthcare, there's so many variables to the point we can't even begin to think of the ripple. It's one big ripple, so it is comforting to believe that, but it's also the truth that it's not just black and white. And if you think that you're not really thinking about everything, you can't rationalize the ripple effect of why someone feels like that. You can't, because you don't even know where it begins.
Absolutely.
How the hell would you know?
You can't. And again, this has caused suffering. Imagine the inadvertent suffering we've caused by doing things we weren't meant to do, by forcing our hand, I was thinking about this actually the other day. When you're in the car and there's a space, And so let's say that someone's waiting to cross. So you stop and you say to them, no, you can go now. All right. So they're relying on my judgment. But what I haven't seen is there's a car coming from that way. So when they cross over, they get hit by the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've waved them across. And funny enough, there was something that happened earlier on. I was parked at a traffic light and it was red, and there was a guy standing there and he wasn't going to go. And I was going to say to him, why don't you go? And just as that happened, the light turned green and a car went past.
Blimey.
And I thought, wow. And the point I'm trying to make from that is sometimes you have to and I thought his instinct was good. You let your instinct, when we start interfering with other people's lives, to the point where it's not beneficial. Now, okay, I was trying to do the right thing by letting him go. But, you see what I'm saying? We've just got to be a bit more thoughtful. If we thought about others more than we think about ourselves, which is kind of the point that Jesus was talking about, I think the suffering in the world would be far less. Because if we all took care to think about our actions, about the impact we have on each other, which is why I kind of describe myself as a Christian anarchist now, because I actually believe that as I'm not going to rely on other people to make decisions for me, I try to behave in a way which will benefit other people around me, and I always try to do things for the benefit of others. Okay, and if we all did that, would we reduce suffering in the world?
Yeah. No, that's... Yeah, I think decorum and interference with other people's lives is it's something no one really thinks about with suffering, do they? They don't really think about that. It's never a kind of key part of the argument. And I hope to people listening, it's shifted their view of suffering. And we're not taking anything away from people who suffer, because it's horrific, and some people's lives are pure misery, and it's the saddest thing to see that. And I think there's a famous phrase in the Bible where it's like, the people who suffer like God's most loved children almost. And just one thing I would say, there's this brilliant thing, I've watched it, almost finished it. It's called The Case for Miracles. It's about a guy who was atheist, right? Big atheist. He worked for this atheist newspaper. Definitively didn't believe there was a God. Super skeptical. So he looked into miracles. And he became a Christian from looking into miracles, because he was like, whoa, what is happening?
Yeah.
And, there's arguments, well, why isn't this person healed? Why isn't that happen? But do look into it. I'll link it down in the show notes. And it is something, because some of the stories he said of like a woman who was in bed for decades and decades, told she was about to die, and then God told her all of a sudden, wake up, my child, and like stand or something. And then she got up. And people were praying for her at the exact same time it happened, and on this radio show people prayed for her, and then it's crazy stories like that, where even the doctors and scientists were like, what? Like, we are like in awe. How is this a miracle? There's no other explanation. So do look into that. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree that there's when miracles happen, it's easy, isn't it? That's the thing. When miracles happen, we are justified, and we can say, oh, look, this happened. And I mean, I'm praying for a miracle right now. I mean, there's a lot of people saying that 2024 is the year of the great reveal. Something's going to happen. There's all this stuff about this eclipse on April the 8th. People are saying there's something going to happen in biblical proportions. People have always been saying this, and it really annoys me when people give dates as well, which is why I'm skeptical about April the 8th, but I'm mentioning it because people are talking about it. But they're also saying CERN is starting up as well. What's CERN?
CERN is the collider, the big Hadron Collider in Geneva.
Oh, wow.
And they're saying it's opening up portals and things, and it's really interesting what the sort of the crazy thinking is. Trouble is, sometimes the fantasies are even more crazy than the truth.
Yeah,
so I'm kind of aware of that. I wanted to just just read the Beatitudes, actually, which came to me, which is a little bit about. Okay, so Rory, I just wanted to talk to you about while you were talking about miracles and things like that, and obviously the topic of the conversation has been suffering, and I've been trying to find a trite passage. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of Bible passages on suffering. If you want to find for yourself, just Google Bible passages on suffering. There's a lot. But what I wanted to do, what came to my heart just now, was to read to you the Beatitudes. Now, it's suffering in a way, because the Beatitudes are about people who are struggling, who are suffering, and what Jesus says to them. So I'm going to leave this with you on this beautiful Easter Sunday. And before we finish, I just want to wish everybody a really joyful and happy Easter, and I hope the love of Jesus Christ fills your hearts. He is risen. That beautiful morning when they went down to the tomb and they found the rock rolled away, and instead of a body lying there, I'm getting tingles in my spine. Instead of his body lying there, there was just some clothes, the wrappings, and he'd gone. And if ever you want to understand the truism, this wasn't a made-up thing. There are people, there are investigators who've investigated this. That guy who said "Who rolled the stone?" Amazing book. He was an investigative journalist, and he was an atheist. And after he investigated this, and there's a film about it as well. I'll try and find it for you. It's about who rolled the stone, something like that. Who moved the stone? I think it's called that, something like that. I'll find out for you. And basically, he spent ages researching whether they, because the easiest thing would have been was for his apostles to have nicked the body, okay, but then when he examined it, there was no way that could have happened, because they knew that he'd said he would rise, so they'd put guards all over the place. They weren't going to allow this to happen. They were not going to. And then the fact that Jesus appeared to many people afterwards, so I just always feel that amazing joy that, when you feel vindicated, when someone says, well, I'll show you, and he did. And he did show them. And all those, imagine what Pilate must have thought. Imagine what the Pharisees and Sadducees must have thought. What, all those high priests who had condemned him. Imagine what they thought when all of a sudden he's not there. And he starts appearing to people. You just imagine, you've just killed God.
Yeah.
You're going to have to, but the wonderful thing, Jesus didn't turn around and say, I want you all killed. You're going to go to hell. Yeah. I hate you. He said, forgive them. He said, forgive them. So even the man who nailed his wrist into that, even the man who gave him that sponge, which he used to wipe his backside in his face, he forgave them. He forgave all of us. And through that forgiveness, atheists are able to be atheistic. Yeah. Vegans are able to be vegan. People are allowed to do what they want. Yeah. And instead of making the world a better place, because this man died, we've decided to just give in to greed and hedonistic behavior and behave in ways and hungry, narcissistic ways, selfishness, and you can't blame God for people's behavior. So don't blame suffering on God. So on that note, I wanted to read one of the most beautiful. Can I just
add something?
Yeah.
Well, about that as well, of him rising, I will look at that. Like, people say, well, why didn't he reveal himself differently? But I think that also reveals a lot about God in free will. Because if free will didn't exist, God would, rain down. Everyone would see it. There'd be no shadow of a doubt. But then what would it be? It'd be like a theocracy. It wouldn't be a faith.
Brilliant.
Like, free will has to exist. Like,
yes.
If there isn't doubt, then there's no free will, is there?
It has to.
God exists.
And that's how much he loved us. Because if I want a child to love me, or if I want a woman to love me, I could force them. I could put them in chains. So you will love me. You will love me.
That's not love.
That's not love.
That's not.
Love is setting it free.
It's a choice.
Love is opening the gate and saying you can go, but if you love me, you'll stay. That's what God says, and too many people just rush off and deny him. And I just, I'm the one who's staying. So I want to just say to everybody that have a wonderful, blessed Easter. We're going to, I think, cut this short now.
You can do.
I'm going to read this now. So what I want to leave you with is this beautiful, probably the most famous words that Jesus spoke, which is from the Sermon on the Mount. It's called the Beatitudes. And for me, this encapsulates a little bit of what we're speaking about the elements of suffering, because in each of these, there's an element of suffering, the different types of suffering that people have. And this is what he says. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And I just want to finish this. He says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven."
Absolutely beautiful, Ray. Beautiful. I could just picture it. Just the sun shining, just sat there.
Imagine having been there. Imagine sitting at his feet listening to that. And imagine the perspective of those people who'd never heard anybody say anything. When is a poor person blessed? When is someone, who's pure in heart blessed?
Yeah. I mean, it's
in that context.
I mean, he was a revolutionary, wasn't he?
He was.
He was the embodiment of anti-establishment.
Well, he was, and there's never really been such a vicious and powerful regime, as the Romans.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
And,
I think this has been a really special episode. I mean, they've all been amazing, but I think we kind of grappled with ideas a bit more there, didn't we?
I think we always do, Rory.
Yeah.
I mean, your insight is amazing, and I love the fact that you've asked me to be part of this. Thank you.
Thanks for being on. I mean, people love you.
Oh well, I hope so. I'm open to people doubting me and questioning me. Please feel free. I love to discuss things with people. So if you have an issue and you don't believe what I say is right, or you don't like what I say, please come and talk to me about it. But seriously, Rory, you're a shining light for your age group as well. You give me hope that the world that I grow old in will be full of amazing people like you, because I want to grow old in a world where I can look back and say, do you know what? It was worth it. It was worth it, because this world is a beautiful place. And I would love for us all, this whole world, to go back to that paradise that God created. And the only way that's going to happen is through people not practicing religion, but practicing faith and trusting in God and letting God lead their lives instead of them trying to lead their lives and screwing it all up. So on that note, I wish everybody happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
I'm going to say a quick prayer if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so what a day to pray. What a day. Father God, I just want to thank you for everything, everything you've given us. I thank you for this beautiful world that we inhabit. And I thank you for the fact that you loved us so much that you sent your only Son to die on the cross for us, a hideous and horrible death. But through his suffering, we're able to understand and appreciate that you're there for all of us who suffer, and that you and us will be vindicated in your love. And I ask, Father God, that we were all vindicated where we need vindication, and that we are all saved by the love of Jesus Christ, and that this is a special day for each and every one of you, and that if you get a moment, just a quiet moment, 5 minutes today, you'll sit and pray and ask the Father to touch your heart and fill you with his love. And I pray that he will fill you so full that you will be bursting with joy. And I pray that for everybody. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And thank you to everyone who's listened. It means so much. Again, if you're listening to the end, I fucking adore you. Thank you for just giving up your time. It means so much. And we fucking love doing this every Sunday. Incite, the new show. If you do enjoy it, as I always say, the only way this show grows is if you share it. So please get out there and share it. If this has impacted you and you think can impact someone else, send it to them. And not to self-promote too much, but it would mean a lot and it would help this grow, because we want to do massive things. And with all of you guys, we can do that. And, you know, if to anyone out there suffering, our hearts bleed for you and we care about you. And please do, you know, reach out at Reg Podcast on Instagram, at Rory Podcast on Twitter, or email at theradicalenglishtgentleman@gmail.com. But it's been an absolute blast.
And I just want to say, like Rory just said, if you are suffering and you want us to pray for you, it doesn't. We're not going to do it here online, but call us, get in contact with Rory. Rory will get in contact with me. Give us your information. I'm very, very happy to pray with you, or even talk to you if you want to talk.
Anyone, please
seriously.
reach out. Please do, because we care about every single one of you who listen. Like, every one of you is a human being who's got their earphones on, got their AirPods, their speaker, on the train, on work, at the gym, going in their car, going for a walk, sleeping on their bed.
In the bath.
In the bath. I kind of, like, you know, you are all individuals who listen to this, and we treat you like individuals. So don't think we just think you're one person listening. We care about you as a human being, not as just a single individual. But thank you so much for watching. Fucking love all of you. If you are listening on Apple, please do give it the rating. It would mean a lot to just chuck a rating, even if you hate it. It would mean a lot. And also on Spotify. And again, share about if you do enjoy it. But any last words?
No, just happy Easter. Have a great day. And look forward to speaking to you next week.
Happy Easter.
God bless you. Have a great week.
Love you all. And I'll see you soon.
Take care.
Next time. It's bye from me.
Bye from me.
Peace.